Morning, folks. Got us a long drive ahead of us today. Looking at, I don't know, from A to B, it's going to be close to 1,300 miles or so. But today we're going from Gulf Coast of Mississippi to Virginia, somewhere in Virginia. Roanoke is at least as far as I want to get, but somewhere between Roanoke and Harrisonburg. Anyways, we have been on the road for about 10 minutes now, and yeah, a lot of time still ahead of us. So I've got some things to share with you today, help pass the time and, you know, make things interesting. I haven't had a video in a while, so we'll see how it goes. Hopefully an uneventful trip. And I'll catch up with y'all in a minute. Hey? Subject of first stories. Issues I've had with the truck on long road trips. It seems like, I don't know, I must have bad luck. Whenever I want to drive 1,000 miles or whatever it is, there's just been a couple notable cases of issues, and in particular electrical issues. I've never experienced electrical issues with this truck besides on 1,000-mile road trips. So this first one was when I first got the truck back in 2014, and it just started running one day, real rough idle with check engine light, and I wasn't sure what that was all about. So sometimes I'd go driving it and it would stall out or something like that, but usually once it stalled out and you started it back up, it would run perfectly fine, you know, for the rest of the day, or yeah, pretty much for the rest of the day. Well, I decided it was my fuel control actuator that when I would first start it up, it would be stuck in the fully open position at idle, and when it would stall, it would, you know, have gotten flipped to fully off. So I ordered a new FCA, installed it, and lo and behold, for 3 days the truck runs normal. I'm like, oh, that was it. And I've got this 1,000-mile road trip that I need to go on. So what happens is, very early in that trip, the rough idle comes back. I get it to go away for a little bit. You know, actually I got it to go away for like 300 miles. You know, but it just kept coming and going. And for a while I was running with it. For a long time I was running with it. Probably another couple hundred miles. You know, I made it home. I tried some things, such as drain the fuel filter. Maybe there was water in there, making it run funny or something. Tried that. You know, that was another thing that tricked me, because as soon as I did that, I fired the truck up, and well, I got to where I was going, and I decided to have the truck taken to shop, because I had no clue what was going on at this point. The shop takes a look at it, and they've got it for like an hour. And they call me up, and they're like, well, your rail pressure is at 35,000 PSI at idle. And we found this module connected to your truck. And we took it off. One of these pressure boxes gives you like 50 horse. We took it off, and we put a stock Mopar wiring harness on, and the truck fires right up, no issues at all. And so that was it. No more issues after that. So for, you know, a little wiring harness, wasn't even the truck's fault. Can't blame Cummins for this, can't blame Chrysler. It was that aftermarket, whatever it was. I don't even know the brand because I think it's been on there long enough that the logos and everything were worn off of it. So that was a big headache for my day driving. Well, I think I drove 16 hours that day. What a headache. So that's story number one for y'all. We are, let's see, about 35 minutes into our drive. We're in Biloxi, Mississippi. Get back to you in a little bit with another story. Electrical story number two. This one, I was trying to move back here to Mississippi, and it's the same kind of drive I'm doing right now. A little bit different route that I was taking because I was going to stay at Buddy's place in North Mississippi. Well, not really north, Philadelphia, Mississippi. And I'm driving, and I'm about 275 miles into my trip. Next thing you know, check gauge's light comes on, and my voltage gauge drops to about 8 volts. Nothing seemed to change in the way the truck was running or anything like that. It just randomly did it. So I went over here to my Edge CTS2 and pulled up the voltage gauge, and it was reading about 12.2 volts. So I thought to myself, well, you know, I mean, if they're 12 volt batteries, I guess everything should be okay, but I don't know, let's watch it. So I'm driving down the road, and I'm noticing it's coming down to 12.0, 11.9. This was over the course of about an hour. So I pull over at a truck stop, and I'm like, well, let's pop the hood and check all my grounds, check all my wiring, see if anything looks funny, and just kind of mess around with stuff. I did that, got back in the truck, fired it up, and now we're charging. We're at 14 volts. That lasted for about an hour, and then we got check gauges again. I looked at my voltage, and we're hovering in the low 12 volts again. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe it'll snap out of it again. I don't know what it could be. I'm driving. I'm into Tennessee by this point. Driving through Tennessee. While I was in Tennessee, we went from about 12.0 volts down to about 11.5, 11.4. I stop where I always stop when I'm in that area of the country, Fort Payne, Alabama, for lunch. I always stop there. And at that point, I was like debating myself, well, what am I going to do, you know? Problem isn't solved. I need to do something, I guess. Well, I decided, well, as long as we got decent voltage, let's push on, you know, try and get to familiar territory in Mississippi. Okay. So I was at about 11.8, 11.7 volts at that point. We spent a good bit of time in Alabama. We didn't lose much voltage. We came down to like 11.4 or 3 by the time I was into Mississippi. I stopped where I used to live, and at the nearest, you know, AutoZone, I forget if it was AutoZone, Napa, the first spot I stopped didn't have an alternator, but the second spot did. So I bought a brand new, well, it's a remanufactured, but new to me alternator from this shop, or from AutoZone or whatever. And I took it with me in my truck, and I went down to my buddy's house in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And when we got there, we installed this alternator, hoping that was the issue. The alternator was just not charging effectively, or charging intermittently, or charging, you know, only half power, you know. Or is enough to kind of charge the batteries, but we were still losing voltage. At this point, I'm around, you know, like 11.1 volts. Batteries installed. I take the truck for a test drive. Lo and behold, the check gauges light is still on. So that whole night we were debating what else could it be, you know. So I'm like, well, let's try and push to the Gulf Coast now, which is about 3.5 hours away. So I'm pressing on, and I'm only about a half hour into my drive, and my voltage starts to tank. It's going 10.9, 10.8, 10.7 within a matter of a few minutes. I start seeing my volt come down to 10. Now we're below 10. I'm getting worried. I'm coming up on the nearest town, which was Meridian, Mississippi. And I'm pulling into Meridian, and I'm down at like 8.8 volts. You know, pretty soon underneath that, I started to lose power in the truck. I started losing my gauges, and you know, analog gauges here. Started to lose them. I lost the turbo, so I was naturally aspirated there at the very end, and I pulled into the nearest gas station as soon as I lost the turbo. And shut the truck off, popped the hood. I had a guy coming, trying to help me out. I was texting people too and telling them, hey, you know, I'm broke down technically because we ran out of battery. And we tried charging the passenger's battery, and it did pretty much nothing. 10 minutes of charge, truck wouldn't start or anything. Then, like, let's start charging the driver's battery. Now, all this while, there's this guy hanging around us, annoying the daylights out of us, just pretending like, I mean, pretty much pretending like he's trying to help us and stuff. It's just, I don't know, it's nothing better to do than bother us. And I'm like, I wish I would not have stopped in this area, in this gas station. Well, we're charging the driver's battery. He's over here telling me, you know, oh, it's my idea. You know, when I do fire up the truck after about 10 minutes charging the driver's battery. And he's like, oh, you gotta give me credit for this one. You know, you owe me something or whatever. How about giving me a pair of your shoes that I saw you take out of the truck? Because I had to remove a lot of stuff from my truck to get to my socket set and stuff, because I was going to re-torque down all the battery cables and things like that. And it was that you know, getting my batteries charged was enough to get the truck started and running again, but the check gauges light would still be on. Well, this guy ends up coercing me, harassing the daylights out of me, you know, physically onto me about these shoes. So I decide just to give him the shoes. Brand new pair of Nike shoes. You know, I'm a New Balance guy anyways. But still, I wasn't too happy about that because, you know, I was pretty confident my days of being took advantage of were behind me. So I effectively got robbed. You know, on top of that, night before, it rained heavy, and while I put a tarp over my bed in my truck, it blew off, and all my stuff back there is soaked. So I mean, things have not been going too well for me. I make it to O'Reilly Auto Parts. It's the nearest auto parts store that I could find. And I go in there and ask them, hey, y'all, I'm having a tough time. I'm 1,000 miles into this trip. And I'm over 1,000 miles. I drove 1,040 miles that day one. Personal best. So, no, we're not breaking that today. I could if I wanted to. I've got enough miles to do it. But I don't think we're doing that today. Anyways. O'Reilly Auto Parts gives me a hacksaw. I'm like, I'm going to modify my battery cables to fit tighter, so I'm going to cut a little piece out of them. That's what I did. And that didn't really seem to solve it. I said, can y'all just test my stuff? batteries, whatever. I pull my truck up, starts testing the batteries, like, yeah, running like 11.9 volts. It's not a full charge, it's not where you need to be. So I was like, I really don't know what this is. So I start feeling around in the engine, just kind of messing with stuff again. And I feel this one wire, and this wire is hot. And it don't look too good either. I'm like, yeah, I know this wire didn't look too good this whole time, but jeez, I mean, people are going 100 miles an hour here. We're in, I'll get back to that in a minute. But that wire is hot, so I'm like, let's try and replace that wire. What's the biggest gauge wire you got? I got the biggest gauge wire. It still wasn't big as the wire that I needed. This is that wire that runs from your alternator to your passenger's battery. I replaced that with new ends and new wire, and that wire is still in this truck to this day. It works great, even though it's not as big of gauge as the old wire. It has done a fantastic job. I thought it was just going to be a temporary fix, but it's been great. I got on the road, headed down I-59, and I just start seeing my voltage coming back up, 12.2, 12.3, 12.4. Eventually we plateau up at around 13.9, 14.0. Oh. Oh yeah, wow. Yeah, it's a little rocky when you hit the Alabama line. And welcome to Alabama. Road smooths out. I don't know, it's like no man's land for like a few hundred yards there. No one fixes the road. Now it's smooth as silk. Anyways, we're just over an hour into the drive. Just hit Alabama. So I made it down to Slidell, Louisiana, which is where I was staying the night. And it was Super Bowl Sunday, so I was just glad to be there. You know, glad to have made it there. As all but 25 miles left to drive till I was, you know, where I'm moving into. So it was a heck of a day. Certainly very eventful. I don't want a day that eventful today. So we're 69 miles into the drive or so. 69, 70 miles into the drive. And 1 hour into the drive. So making decent time so far. Anyways, I'll get back to y'all with some other stories here in a minute. Let's get past Mobile. I'll get y'all some more stories.